Good. Hello, everybody. Ooh, I get my own little, look at that. I get my own overlay and everything. Cool. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Soldiers of the Lich Queen Season 1 recap. I'm Sam, the Dungeon Master, and in an hour, you'll get to meet everybody or see everybody again if you've been watching. If you're here for a recap, just to remind yourself of what this is, or if you've never watched before, welcome. And we're going to go over what this campaign is, what it's been, where we are, and how we got here. So, let's get started. It all began far long before any of the players were ever born. Well, their characters anyway, not the players. Though, no, I can't claim that. Anyway, I couldn't do that. I could not say that accurately for Justin because we're like the same age. So, it all started when with the Githyanki, which, if you're not familiar, the Githyanki are essentially an actually alien race in D&D. They arrived in the multiverse alongside the Illithid, who are also not native to any of the planes, actually. Something happened, no one is quite sure what. The Illithid remember, but they don't like to talk to people. And they ended up stuck in our realm of existence, bringing the Githyanki with them, who rebelled against the Illithid, killed their way out, killed a lot of them, are the reason that the Illithid are now in hiding on various planes of existence around the multiverse, and split into two factions, the Githyanki and the Githzerai, which I'm sure that'll come up at some point during the campaign. The Githyanki, however, being not from not local, have a very limited population, but on the astral plane or on the astral sea, they don't age, so that keeps their population up. But it's just they are a society based on going on Viking style raids throughout the planes of existence, which means that they live a pretty dangerous life. Their population is starting to decrease. And with a limited population, they did realize we need to figure out some way of addressing this. So, the Lich Queen herself, the immortal undead leader of the Githyanki, said basically we need to figure this out, and set it to her knights and lieutenants to come up with solutions. One such knight, named Grantar, came up with an idea, which was basically just like, well, why don't we just start intermingling our genetics with the other races of the multiverse, of the different planes here? And of course, they didn't exactly know how that would work out. They didn't know if they were going to be genetically compatible with anybody. Given the alien nature of their existence, they're from a different set of planes entirely. So he set up basically a long-term experiment where, through an arrangement made with various people throughout the world, he, through the assistance of science, sired a large number of children of various whose mothers represented a variety of races, and with the intention of just seeing how it's going to turn out and seeing what a half Gith with these various races looks like, to see if they are going to be successful members of their society and if this is a viable option. And that's where the players come in. Each of them was raised, well, all but one of them was raised amongst was raised by their mother, either among their home people or not. Some of them were raised separately on their own. In particular, we have Drusilla, who was raised by her mother. And at the beginning of the campaign, we're going to start with there. Drusilla, who was raised by her mother in the woods. We had Reggie, the half-orc bard, who was, if I remember correctly, raised by his mother on a nice, relaxing island full of musicians and artists by the sea. And we also had Aja, who was raised in a mountainous half-orc tribe. At some point in their life, at the same time, but at some point in their life, given that they were all different ages, their births were staggered so that they would all come of age about the same time. They were all collected by the Githyanki, who showed up one day in their astral skiffs, popping out of nowhere in the air, and just arrived to collect them. Once they, some of them came willingly, some of them it was less willing. But given the arrangement, their mothers all just kind of for the most part, let them go. Drusilla's especially. And they were all brought to separate enclaves throughout the material plane because, and the reason this was done is because Githyanki, because the astral sea does not have a concept of time, time does not pass, people don't age, the Githyanki do in fact need to raise their children in enclaves on the material plane to adulthood, because if you just have a baby, well, actually, yeah, if you have a baby in the astral sea, that baby will be a baby forever because time doesn't pass. So you need to, they need to have their children protected on enclaves on the material plane. And Grantar set up special enclaves for his variety of children, of which he has many. There were at least, I think, 20 people at the first enclave, and there were multiple enclaves. So what happened then was all of them were brought to this enclave, where then they were trained and taught the ways of the Githyanki for 2 years together. They were put into 4-person squads to be trained and get used to working together and everything. Again, with a variety of responses and feelings on the subject. Some people were totally cool with it. Some were more resistant. This also brings us to Hannibal, the one member of the Enclave who was not raised among his people. He was actually raised in the Enclave his entire life. In particular, pretty much by Grantar, was raised from infancy to, I forget how, Hannibal's in his like 30s, I want to say. Yes, he's in his 30s. Yeah. Until now, never left the Enclave, never knew anything about the life outside the Enclave, and believed that to be because, well, Hannibal is half Triton, but came out looking, he has fins and fins on his arms and the top of his head, and has the general appearance of a humanoid anglerfish, which he was always told was due to just an incompatibility between Triton and Githyanki, and that essentially he was a failed experiment, is what he was always told throughout his life. It was after that all of them were brought together one stormy night, and they were told, you're going to work together, you're all family, you're all half siblings, and you're going to work together, you're going to prove yourselves as proper Githyanki, so once you have done so and completed your training, we can join our brethren in the Astral Sea, so we can all become loyal soldiers of the Lich Queen, hence the name of the campaign. So 2 years passed, and Hannibal, Drusilla, Reggie, and Aja worked together and became an effective unit. Eventually came the day of their graduation, which was the first episode we had, where the 4 of them were brought to a clearing with a building in it. At this place, there was some sort of Eladrin spellcaster present who set up some kind of ward around the perimeter, around the testing ground, but they weren't entirely sure what that was about. And they were several mephits were summoned, little like flying elemental goblin creatures that they had to attack. Basically, they had to attack and hold the structure in the middle of the clearing. They successfully did so using sound tactical decision making and graduated. In fact, they did so well that after some resting and relaxation, Grantar invited them on their first Githyanki raid to show them what they had to look forward to. Hello. So they all hopped aboard an astral skiff, their first time since they had been brought to the Enclave, which sailed up into the air, took off, and the material plane faded into the astral sea, and they saw the ambery, purpley, cloudy space of the astral sea around them before they entered back into the material plane, where they found themselves above a village with multiple astral skiffs flying around it at a range, but they also observed several of those being blown out of the sky by a wizard on the ground who was chucking fireballs up at them. In fact, their astral skiff was shot down and crash landed, and they were separated from the rest of the group. They managed to fight their way through the town as it was being obliterated by this raid and by the combat. They snuck their way past a Bigby's hand that had been set up to guard one of the avenues of approach, and then managed to take down the wizard who was defending the place, she was very much out of spell slots. The rest of the Githyanki were then able to successfully descend and attack the village or town. It was at this point that our four siblings kind of began to have a bit of a moral conundrum about all of this, and realized exactly what they were being raised to do and who they were being raised to be. The four of them kind of decided they didn't really like being the bad guys here, and they did not like they didn't really enjoy what they had in store for them. So the four of them began plotting seditious thoughts. They were brought back to the Enclave after this, and once they were back at the Enclave, they were told that it was time for them to be set out into the world, because their final test before they could truly join their brethren in the Astral Sea was they needed to find and hunt down an Illithid, a Mind Flayer. They needed to. That is their ultimate goal, technically, from at least from the Githyanki's perspective. Their ultimate goal here is to find and kill a Mind Flayer. And for this end, they were just kind of released into the world and said, all right, go ahead, find one and go kill it, and then bring it back to us, because the final graduation is presenting the head of a Mind Flayer to the Lich Queen herself. So they were given an option to choose where they wanted to drop off, where they wanted to start in the world. And they chose what has historically been the largest city in the world, the city of Pyre. Pyre sits on the coast, or on the western coast of the easternmost continent of the world, or at least given the current orientation view of the map. And it is the capital of a group of nations called the Arclight Covenant, which are 4 nations united under a 4-part theocracy under leaders known as tetrarchs. 4 leaders, tetrarch. Is a theocracy under the rule of a sort of living god known as the Silver Flame, which several of the players have visited. A massive, towering silver fire that sits inside what used to be the palace in the city of Pyre, before it was called Pyre, the capital of the once nation named Diraluf. There are 3 other nations, Menetet, Iolith, and the other one that I can never remember, that is home to the Hobgoblins, because the military arm of the Arclight Covenant is Hobgoblins who have turned away from the goblinoid god Yunogu. Yes, a recap. So the party arrived at the city. However, as they left, they found that one of their siblings, Reggie, had left without them already, and had gone on ahead with the permission of Grantar to begin scouting the place out. So Hannibal, Drusilla, and Aja left and were picked up by an astral skiff and dropped off outside of Pyre, which they found to be a massive, massive city miles across on the coast. They entered into the city, and they sort of just said, we're here to start a new life. We are, as long as we have free reign, why should we go and do what the Githyanki say we should? Why don't we just essentially fail at this quest and just never finish it, and we can just live our lives? That's more or less what they've been doing. They did odd jobs around the city. They helped a wizard student or university student clear phase spiders out from his master's house that he'd accidentally summoned. And Hannibal managed to get his hands on a phase spider egg, which I think then Drusilla took and made sure was destroyed, and replaced it with a different egg that was found in an alchemist shop and then colored the correct color with alchemy. And I think Hannibal ate that. At some point, Hannibal found his way to an exotic pet store and bought himself a death dog puppy, who he named Moloch, who has lived inside his pocket ever since. And then the last job they did was a bank in the city was looking for essentially white hat bank robbers to test out their security, and they basically said, hey, try and break into our bank, try it out, see what happens, and let us know what weaknesses you exploited. They did. They traumatized a poor bank worker by breaking in through the sewers and a loose wall in the basement of the bank that connected to the sewers. and they were able to successfully get into the vault and then point out all the flaws in the system they found. But before they could collect their payment on that, on their way back, they found themselves under attack by a variety of creatures in the streets, coming after them, who seemed to always knew where they were. It was after a couple of these fights that their handler from their handler, the Githyanki handler, that was basically their point of contact, their mentor figure, the person who she was kind of in charge of them, the person that they answered to. She showed up, teleported to the city, and informed them that somehow the Illithid had found the enclaves, all of them, at least as far as she was aware, and had attacked all of the enclaves at once. Part of this was allowing them to find where the each of the people from, or each of the groups from the enclaves had set up shop and had gone to live, which is how these creatures were finding them. They were sent by the Illithid. Aja, low on patience with the Githyanki and upset, grabbed the handler by the robes and lifted her up a wall and sternly expressed her displeasure, but Drusilla and Hannibal managed to talk Aja down. But however, at this point, it became too much for Aja to bear, especially given that they still had not found Reggie. They still did not know where Reggie, their sibling, was. So, rather than go with Hannibal and Drusilla, because Hannibal and Drusilla had been tasked with going and checking on the nearest enclave in the mountains nearby, Aja decided that it was time for her and her siblings to part ways, and she was going to go off into the world looking for Reggie and to see what she could find out. So it was this point that Aja parted ways with the party, leaving us with only Hannibal and Drusilla. It was at this time that we go over to a different enclave, the enclave in the mountains, where Sid, a monk named Sid, and at this point a bard named Ilvem were living. Now, the two of them had been taken from their homes of very different circumstances. Ilvem's home, where Ilvem was taken from, is still a mystery. Ilvem does not like to talk about where they come from. Sid has expressed that he comes from a noble house in Uralmar, the land of the Lake Elves, and he was not exactly happy with where he was taken from, or he was not exactly happy being taken. Ilvem seems to express that they were very perfectly fine with being taken from where they were, because they were not in a good place. So, the two of them were just sort of hanging out in their enclave, preparing for their graduation. Grantar was staying there for the time being. However, the two of them, Grantar asked to meet with the two of them, but they never found out what Grantar wanted to say to them, because as they climbed up the mountain to speak to Grantar, they hid as they found him being restrained by 3 Illithid, who were in the process of imposing their will over him and enthralling him as one of their servants. They escaped and managed to run back down to the encampment, or to the enclave, where they found it under attack, under siege, by thralls of the Illithid, intellect devourers and quaggoths and a variety of other horrible monsters, charging around the enclave, attacking and killing people as combat erupted. During this time, Ilvem seemed to receive directions from somewhere. Ilvem seemed to be guided to the cave system that the enclave was attached to, and Sid and Ilvem snuck and made their way into the caves, sneaking deeper and deeper, sneaking past a variety of creatures. They were being chased by a group of quaggoths when all of a sudden the torches lining the hallway they were running down glowed brighter and brighter and brighter until they exploded like a flashbulb, blinding the quaggoths behind them, allowing them to escape. They eventually found their way deep, deep, deep into the cave system in the mountain, to the very end of a hallway with a locked iron door. They managed to find a key on the outside and open it, where inside they found an honest to cord angel chained down to the ground and trapped within a magic circle. This angel went by the name of Suriel, that Ilvem that seemed to know Ilvem and be familiar with them. The Ilvem then approached the angel. They unchained him, and as they did, his wounds seemed to heal a bit. His glow returned, and his wings spread out at the same time as Ilvem's did. Ilvem discovering the true nature of their Azamar heritage, and discovering that Suriel is in fact their familial and angelic guide, which is a thing that Azamar can have. But apparently, the Gith, as a means of attempting to control Ilvem, had captured Suriel from a very, very young age. Since Ilvem was very, very young, preventing him from assisting Ilvem. Once Suriel was free, Sid and Ilvem sat and waited in the room, waiting for something to happen. It was at this time that Hannibal and Drusilla, they set out from the city. They took one of the sending stones that they had obtained previously, and they buried it under a group of trees outside the city of Pyre, just in case, with a message, just in case Aja should return. And they used a magic map that they had been given by their handler that allowed them to travel very, very quickly between the city and the enclave. Basically, just like every step they took covered leagues, but on this specific path. And they managed to make their way up into the mountains, where they entered into the enclave, and they found it more or less abandoned and destroyed. The fighting was over. They arrived for more or less the aftermath. As they entered into the encampment, they made their way down into deep down into the cave system, as though felt as though they were being guided there. And when they reached the bottom of the cave system at a familiar iron door, they opened it, only to find two more of their half-siblings, Sid and Ilvem, waiting inside for them. The four of them spoke, kind of got an idea for what was going on, who they were, and what had happened. And the four of them went to leave together. However, some residual watchdogs, so to speak, were present in the enclave, and on their way out, they encountered a mind-controlled Grantar who spoke to them in the voice of an Illithid, and before they could do anything to him, vanished and was replaced by an enthralled giant, stone giant, if I remember correctly. The four of them were horrendously outclassed in this fight, being fairly low-level characters, so they did their best to get away. Hannibal, in a feat of arcane combination, back when he was still just an alchemist, I think, used his racial feature Gust of Wind to hold back the giant, but then combined in a scroll of Fireball that he'd obtained, casting the Fireball into the Gust of Wind, and discovering his first spell combination, which is a thing I do, where instead of just erupting in an explosion, the Fireball, the energy from the Fireball exploded inside the Gust of Wind, which channeled it forward and turned it into a roaring column of fire that knocked the giant back. They were all able to escape and run outside make their way outside of the cavern, at which point, as the giant stepped out into the sunlight, a young red dragon descended from the sky and tackled the giant to the ground, and the two of them did battle until the dragon was able to finish off the giant. The dragon introduced herself, Zenvarath, introduced herself as Grantar's mount, as Githyanki have a mountain partner, as the Githyanki have a special relationship with red dragons through a deal with Tiamat that allows them to basically red dragons have a like French Foreign Legion style relationship with Githyanki, where young red dragons can sign up to help the Githyanki in their raids. As part of this, they get a chunk of the gold and treasure from a raid. They are given house basically their own lair and cave in the city of the Githyanki, where they save up their wealth, and eventually, when they grow to a large enough size to set out on their own, basically when they reach adult size, they then take their collected winnings from these raids and they go back to the material plane to set up a horde of their own. So it's like a horde starter program for red dragons. And unfortunately, I cannot claim that I made this one up. This is straight out of Mordenkainen's tome. I think this is out of Morden. It's either out of Mordenkainen's or Volo's, where this is actually just in there in the relationship with the Githyanki, and I love that. So this is Grantar's dragon. The dragons, of course, love spending time on the material plane because the more time they spend on the material plane, the quicker they age. They hang out in the astral sea, they don't age, and their existence in this way just kind of continues. So she informed them that she was Grantar's partner. She saw him get captured. She was unable to do anything. So, insofar as the party is attempting to rescue Grantar and get him back, she will provide them assistance as much as possible. Now, since the party is in the process of living in a city, she can't really help that much. So she kind of hung out at the Enclave. They all went back to the city. They found their way to the Onyx Cat Cabaret after Hannibal got kicked out of a different inn for spraying dog poop all over the place in an attempt at modifying a grease spell. They found their way to the Onyx Cat Cabaret, which is a fairly large, well-established cabaret / inn in the entertainment district of Pyre. They found their way to some work with a group known as the Lost Cousins, a sort of loose collection of do-gooders in the city who tried and just help out their community. There was the first and only job they did for them was in helping out a few of them who had attempted to rescue a ship captain who had been captured by a mercenary group known as the Chimera's Personal Army. This group is generally known as a bunch of just rat bastards who will do anything for money and generally are hired by the nobility of the city in a plausible deniability way of the rich people of the city getting away with doing bad things. So in some sort, for whatever reason, they had captured this ship captain, presumably because of some sort of business dealing. The party did their best. It is about at this time, I think, that they started referring to themselves as the Disaster Siblings, as they attempted to break into one of the Chimera's outposts in the city. They sort of applied each of them kind of had their own plan going, and they all kind of did them at once. 2 of them ended up captured. They went and found their way, or the ones that didn't get captured, found their way to an agent of a far-off nation called Farathan that Ilvum seemed to have some relationship with, or the country, not the person. And they purchased gunpowder from this person, though Ilvum provided information about a Inquisition and Crusaders of Farathan on this side of the sea that this person was so interested in that they provided the gunpowder for free. They then used this gunpowder in a creative application of a silence spell to break out their party members and the captain and escape. And they were able to provide this information to the ruling temple guards of the city, who then were able to go and make the arrest of this branch of the Chimera's personal army for kidnapping a person, which is definitely illegal. After this, they did some odd jobs. They fought in the bone grinder. They kind of just went around making money. One of the things they did more recently is they were making their way along the river when a barge making its way along stood up out of the water and showed itself to be essentially a giant robot, a warforged colossus that was full to the brim with a group known as Mansfield Raiders, a group of machine fetishist cultists, more or less, that are absolutely obsessed with artifice and machines. And they leapt out of the thing using it like a robot Trojan horse and began attacking the city. The party leapt into action and began attacking the raiders, preventing them from getting to civilians. And Ilvum and Sid made their way inside the creature, or the giant monstrosity robot, in order to try and destroy it from the inside. It was at this time that several of the higher leveled members of the city jumped in and began aiding as well. They observed a high cleric of the city who cast such a powerful healing spell that it just put everyone back to full health, including several of the guards who had been injured. A monk of the Silver Flame who was able to move faster than the eye could even track, moving around attacking raiders, as well as a wizard who, using something known as an artifact spell, summoned a group of chains out of thin air to restrain the robot. During this time, Ilvum and Sid were able to destroy its power source from the inside, before jumping into the river, where they were able to join Drusilla, who had been holding back an entire side of the river on her own, just in wolf form, just fighting off raiders, while Hannibal led the charge uh, with a group of guards of the city and kind of united them together and led them to victory on their side, where they were able to then run across the bridge and join Drusilla in finishing them off. They were thanked for their service by the monk of the Silver Flame. The rest of them sort of vanished and left. They also, at this time, met, and during this fight, one of the people they met was an sibling and bodyguard of an ambassador from a nation called Galden across the ocean, where they also, including also a bodyguard of Galden's leader / living god, named Dahira. Karis is the brother, and Dahira is the bodyguard. And then Karis's sister is a woman known as Isra, who holds the title of Stormlord of Galden, and she's in Pyre on some sort of diplomatic mission. After this, they went and they hung out with Karis for a bit. They partied. They did some drinking in the embassy. Drew met with Dahira to ask some questions, because Dahira is in fact a full-blooded Githyanki who seems to have a interesting relationship with the Githyanki as a whole, and does not seem to like the group as a whole. So the party was able to identify with her in a way from that. However, they on their way back from the embassy, Ilvum and Sid had a bit of a sparring match, a bit of a duel in the park, which I believe Ilvum won. However, on Ilvum's way back down from flying up into the air and firing down eldritch blasts from above, Ilvum noticed that there was a fire in the entertainment district, which they declined to mention until after the duel was over. Everyone went running towards the entertainment district. When they arrived, they found the Onyx Cat Cabaret, the place where they had been staying, aflame and being attacked by Chimera's personal army members in disguise, or in plain clothes. It seemed that they were there. They had observed the party there, and they wanted to arrive and exact their revenge for getting the majority of them arrested. And in doing so, they decided to attack the cabaret and the owner, Mirth, as well, tiefling. The party, enraged by this, especially Hannibal, who had left Moloch in his room, leapt to work and just started killing chimeras left and right. They made their way into inside the cabaret, where they saw several of them, but it was at this point that the wizard from the river that they had seen earlier arrived and revealed himself to be Mirth the cabaret owner's husband. And he began just wasting people, given the fact that he is a very high-level wizard. In fact, he is one of the highest-ranking members of the university. So, at this point, the party kind of decided, maybe we've spent too much time in this city. Maybe we need to do some traveling, because clearly we are wanted people. And they decided that, and Hannibal had heard stories that there's a nation to the south called Kukui, which currently has a relationship where it is more or less being run by Triton. There's some sort of political situation going on there that they had explained later, which is that Kukui used to have a king, and the king had a son and 3 triplet daughters who were all born more or less at the same time. There's no real agreement on who's the oldest. And the king had declared his son as his successor, but then Kukui went to war. During said war, the king and the prince both died. The king had never picked a second successor. He had never declared one of his daughters as the next in line. However, he had married off his daughters to the ruling nobles of the 3 largest cities of Kukui, and as a means of, creating good ties with those cities, and just making sure that there was a good connection between the, overall kingdom and the largest centers of trade and commerce and population. Unfortunately, what this resulted in is the 3 most influential nobles of the country were then left with each one with an equivalent claim to the throne, which descended the nation into civil war, as each of the sisters essentially said, no, I'm the one who's supposed to be in charge. No, I'm the one who's supposed to be in charge. And their mother, the queen mother, who was just kind of left to watch as her three daughters just tore the nation apart. And during this time, their mother, who was a close friend of the Triton Kingdom of the Ocean, called in the Triton for help. And what she did was she lured her daughters to a meeting, a meeting in neutral ground at the former palace of Kukui, where their father had lived, basically saying that she was going to give her support to one of them. Now, this was a big deal because having their mother, the queen, lend support to one of them and sort of pick one and pick sides would have gone a long way to ending the war for one of them. So all three of them showed up. However, when it was revealed that the three of them had been lured there as a means of brokering peace, they were angry, and one of them even struck out and murdered her own mother. The Triton arrived and found this out, or the Triton arrived in time to see this, and basically they saw that their friend had been killed by her own daughters, and their friend who had basically asked them, like, help me save my country. And so the Triton stepped in and fulfilled her wishes and basically showed up out of the ocean and hopped into this civil war and ended it by taking over, just kind of conquering things for themselves. However, this was on behalf of the Queen Mother. They began a suzerainship, which basically means that while they are technically in charge of things, they more or less allow Kukui to run itself. They just kind of occupy what would be kind of the federal level. They occupy the highest level of everything, but then from then on down, it's all Kukui ownership and everything. They're basically politically babysitting the country because the three nobles that are in charge of it are power hungry and trying to delve it into civil war. So Tritons basically run the place. So Hannibal heard about this and was like, oh, hey, other Tritons. I've never met other Tritons before, except for like one dick who was also living in the Enclave with me who I didn't like. So the three of them said, sure, we can take a vacation. We'll go head down to Kukui. Cid, on the other hand, decided that he wanted to stay back for a bit and train with the monk that they had met. So they all parted ways for a little bit. Cid staying back and doing some training with the monk for a few days while the party traveled their way down the coast. The name of the monk is Shahila, by the way. Who Cid also found out is not just any monk, but is the herald of the Tetrarchs of the Silver Flame. Basically, like the main like go-to person for the ruling Tetrarchs. The party made their way south. They got into some adventures along the way, stopping into various towns. They found one town with a pink cow that produced milk that tasted like biting into a strawberry. That was literally the only draw of this town. That was always happening. There was no adventure or really anything going on until the party camped in the woods and observed a familiar sight of an astral skiff appearing out of thin air that they spotted through the rainy, stormy night in the direction of the barn. They hurried over towards the barn. Oh, I almost forgot. As they left the city, they bought an elephant to use as a mount, and they named the elephant Poppy. They also picked up a new friend who was just kind of like, hanging out by the gates, appeared to be falling on some rough times. His name is Xanorn, and they picked him up. He basically was like, hey, I'm going this way. Can I travel with you? And he has since kind of just become a member of the group. They have armed and armored him. He has helped run elephant rides when they go into town. He hangs out with Poppy and charges parents so their kids can play with the elephant. Poppy is very well trained and likes kids. So bringing it back to where I was, they left Xanorn with Poppy, the rest, and then Hannibal, Drusilla, and Ilvim rushed to the barn where they found what was later revealed to be a revenant and several undead gnolls harassing the dairy farmer and trying to get the farmer to let them into the barn so they could steal the cow for their master, who they only refer to as Kilchris the Collector. The party arrived and began doing battle with them, and it was at this point that Cid was awoken in Pyre by a dream connecting them to their siblings, letting them know their siblings were in trouble. They spoke with Shahila, who Basically said like, "Yep, you're good to go. You're almost done with your training." So Sid is working on something. Needs to do a little bit more solo training before he can truly master it. But he was sent along with a blessing of the Silver Flame, which basically allowed him to run from Pyre down the coast, miles and miles and miles in a very short period of time. The blessing of speed of the Tabaxi Tetrarch of the Silver Covenant. So Sid arrived just in time to help finish off the fight. However, as the Revenant died, his weapon vanished, leaving it clear that it had some sort of contingency. They identified him as a Revenant, so he's not dead, but Ilvin was able to take his armor, which was a bracer that basically expands into any sort of armor you like. Yes. They continued south, and then we come to the very last episode, the most recent one, our season finale. Or there was, of course, there was a peach festival they went to. They had a lovely time. It was a fun episode. Just fun, happy-go-lucky, fun times all around. Hannibal tried to cook and resulted in turning something into a chicken. There were very surprising successes in a variety of wrestling matches. Drusilla met with a Loxodon priestess of the Silver Flame, and the two of them had a lovely time together, dancing away the night. And then the next morning, they all left for the city of Bastion, which exists on the coast and is the only city and really the only settlement. First, my bag of holding. Really, the only settlement in this entire region. It is exists in what was once a kingdom that has now fallen a while ago. The lands have been more or less reclaimed by Furbolgs and Goliaths, who live in somewhat conflict with each other, but especially conflict with Bastion, as Bastion is a attempt at reclaiming the land as a former scion of the city, returned back from the northern nation of Silmalon, and with a group of people just like ready to go, and about a couple decades ago, attempted to resettle the place. And the party arrived in the city, and that's where things got real interesting. Hannibal made his way into... Oh, that's right. The bag of holding is gone because no longer an artificer. Hannibal, through the use of study, in Bastion, actually, found his way to the library and studied and made the transition over from artificer just to full-on wizard, because he'd been taking a few levels in wizard and he just was able to switch over. It was at this time that he met with a Triton who was on his way back, who was on his way to the city from Kukui. They were finding out that yes, Kukui is involved in another civil war between different factions. Now we have the Loyalist faction, which are people that are loyal to the nobles that are trying to run the place. We have the Turncoat faction, which are people that basically are like, no, we're good. Actually, we would prefer if the Tritons ruled us more, because they've been very effective rulers. We actually like them. We just want to get rid of our nobility entirely and restructure our government. There's technically a third faction called the Royalists who want to restore the monarchy, but they're barely involved. And the Triton are just kind of trying to manage all of this. So the Triton was a Triton who arrived to take a look at Bastion's secret records hall, or more secure records hall, in order to get information on who might be the actual ruler. Just any correspondence they could find. He didn't assume that it was going to be anything significant, but he had to try. But he sat down with Hannibal and referred to Hannibal as a deep one, and Hannibal was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're a type of Triton called a deep one, the noblest and most respected of our people, from the deepest parts of the ocean." And Hannibal's like, "I thought I looked like this is a mistake." And the guy was like, "No, not at all. You are a very important person amongst our people based on how you look." And Hannibal kind of had his world rocked by that. And this guy was like, "Well, hey, I got to get going, but look me up. I'll be back in Kukui eventually." At the same time, Drusilla was walking around the city when a spirit of fire, a little fox made of fire, began leading her through the streets of the city and brought her to a prison, where she was able to get inside and met with a person who seemed to know her, recognize her, and also knew her mother and kind of treated her mother almost like a deity-like figure. It seemed to be some sort of cult-like action going on with Drew's mother and this person. Um, and it was at this point that before too much could be revealed, a suit of armor, a familiar suit of armor, as Drusilla has been being hunted by these fey suits of armor animated by cobalt blue flame, appeared. This one having a face. Normally they were not intelligent or capable of speech. This one had a face floating in the flame. And basically said, "Come with me and I'll answer all your questions." At which point Xanorn appeared and said, "Don't listen to her," and managed to trap the person in the suit of armor in several places, where identifying that because this person is a fae and incapable of lying, he asked her very specific questions that she refused to answer then, showing that she was not trustworthy. Drusilla decided to trust Xanorn here, but with the intention of asking some questions later on, and they began fighting the suit of armor. At the same time, Ilvem had snuck off after hearing some people speak a familiar language, the language of Farathan. And Sid had decided to follow Ilvem. Ilvem followed these people until they came to an alleyway where there was something painted on the wall, graffiti basically, in the language of Farathan that said something about an inquisition and returning, and something about meeting in Kukui. Ilvem met with these people, spoke with them, and they basically spoke with them in the Farathan. Sid had no idea what was being said, but it was clear that after Ilvem found out everything they needed to know, began attacking the people. One of them tried to run away. Sid appeared out of nowhere, and the two of them began fighting these people. They were able to kill them easily because they were unarmed and unarmored. They mentioned that they were crusaders, and revealed to Ilvem that Farathan, which had recently lost a war 14 years ago, the people who were part of the faction that ran the country at the time, the Inquisition and its crusaders, were not all gone. They'd all fled across the ocean and were now here. And these were two people who identified as crusaders. And they had their weapons and armor stashed at their houses, and Ilvem and Sid managed to kill them before they could get there. Ilvem then used Eldritch Blast to obliterate the brick wall that the message was on, and the two of them ran off to go help Drusilla and Xanorn, who were fighting the suit of armor, who had made their way out into the Bastion Castle courtyard. Hannibal had also made his way there after taking Xanorn had taken Moloch and used Dimension Door on Moloch to send him into the library where Hannibal was, with a note that basically said, like, "Come help." Hannibal ran out to go help the fight. Drusilla was unconscious for a bit, but was magically woken up, and all of them were able to finish off the suit of armor in the courtyard. The authorities of Bastion arrived and were like, "What the hell is going on here?" But Hannibal's Triton friend appeared and just came out of a doorway and vouched for all of them, basically saying, like, they're all good. I vouch for them. They were acting in self-defense. They took him at his word, and the party decided that it was probably time for them to get moving on. On the way out, Sid received some letters, one from a person that they knew in the church, a Sir Egril, one of the members of the Church of the Silver Flame they knew in Pyre, asking the party to look into something for him, a site known as the Windwell, which had been occupied by some sort of ne'er-do-wells of magical nature, presumably necromancers, and for reasons both personal and magical, asked that they go take care of this problem, as well as a personal letter from one Beriadan, which seemed to trouble Sid greatly. In addition, Ilvem, who had tried to leave on their own, had been confronted by Suriel, their angel guide, and convinced to join back up with the party. But it was also informed that Suriel had successfully managed to identify a place where Ilvem could obtain strength that they had been looking for. They've been working on this for a while, and Suriel had identified a location where they could do this, which happens to be a location on their way to the Windwell south. So we left off at the party, riding on Poppy, heading south, everyone with a lot of questions for each other as they continued on their journey and headed towards Kukui. Whew, that was a long recap. And you don't have to wait long to see where this goes, because we will be coming back in about 20 minutes as we get started. Before we do, does anybody in the chat have any questions for me before I sign off? and we take a little break before we come back. Is Hannibal a secret prince? We'll have to find out. Why do you like hurting people emotionally? Because it's good storytelling. Is Ilvem evil? You'll have to ask them that. Why are you so hot and perfect? Aw, thanks. I don't know. How does one become D and Daddy like? This is just my players asking me questions. Watch Demystifying DMing. There you go. Yes, that is the answer. Thank you, Justin. That is the answer. How does one become a D and Daddy like me? Watch Demystifying DMing, and lots of practice. I've been doing this for over 10 years now. DMing at least. I've been playing for a lot longer. All right. Well, folks, I think that is time to say goodbye for now. We're going to take a little bit of a break, get some water, get some refreshments. I've been talking for a long time. I need a drink. And then we are going to be back at 5:15 for the continuation of Soldiers of the Lich Queen Season 2. So, see y'all soon, everybody. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.